Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another Monday Motivation podcast for Monday, July 17th, 2017. So, this week I wanted to tell you a little story about meeting a legendary musician, one of the best saxophone and flute players and vocalists that I've ever met before and in jazz history. I wanted to talk to you about James Moody today. So, back in 2005, I think it was, I was attending the University of New Hampshire, and we were lucky enough to get one of these legendary musicians coming up once a year for the Clark Terry Jazz Festival. And we got to hang out with Clark every year, which was wonderful. But they would always bring in like a saxophone player, usually, to play with Clark. So one of the coolest things is that the students were tasked with going out to the airport and picking up the musician, bringing them back to New Hampshire, and then basically kind of being their personal assistant for the weekend, getting them to the places they needed to go on time. And this presented some wonderful opportunities to me to get to interface with some of these people that I had been listening to for my whole life. So I think probably the coolest experience I had in college was getting to do this for James Moody. So, I went down to the airport, picked him up, brought him back, checked him into his hotel room. And then he said to me, and I didn't even have to ask, he said, "Why don't you come back tomorrow morning and we'll hang out and we'll play a little bit of saxophone together?" So, of course, I'm not going to pass up an opportunity like that. So, the next morning, I grabbed my horn and I went to his hotel room, and I got there at about 9 o'clock in the morning. And he had all of his materials spread out on the bed. So, he probably had about 4 to 5, jazz saxophone books with him. He had his reeds all over the place. He had a couple different mouthpieces that he was playing, and it was clear to me that he had been practicing for quite a while already that morning. So I took out my horn and we got to hanging out. And as we went through the lesson, one of the things that I realized was this guy at the age of, I think he was right around in his early 80s in 2005. I'll have to check that out. But imagine that, a guy who's on top of the world, basically, is one of the most legendary jazz musicians who has ever lived, has played with anybody you could imagine, super successful, still practices every single day. And his practicing was intense. He showed me some of the stuff that he was working on. He was working on some triad pairs, which at the time was brand new to me, and just a wonderful thing to learn from him. But he was also not resting on his laurels, right? He was not just playing the stuff that he had been playing for the last 20, 30, 40 years. He was always in search of the new sounds. He was always trying to bring his playing forward. Now, this is a guy where it would be very, very easy to just kind of play stuff that was in his wheelhouse and not worry about learning anything new because, he still would have gotten hired all over the world. People were still clamoring to get him on their recordings. I mean, he's James Moody, right? He has some of the most famous recordings in jazz history. But that really struck me as something where I started to realize that this is a lifelong process. And you guys will also notice that I posted something this week on Facebook about the oldest working jazz musician in the world. This 102-year-old man in New York City still goes out and plays gigs, still practices daily. It really reminded me of this story, so I kind of wanted to tell it to you. But that's really what we should all be striving for, right? This education, this playing of jazz, it never ends. There is always something new to learn. I don't care if you're Chris Potter, you still need to be practicing all the time. You still need to be learning. You still need to be pushing yourself forward. And it's really like that with anything in life. But, we always relate everything back to jazz in this podcast. And in jazz and music, it's especially true. It's something that I said last week about your personal accountability. You got to have that because if you don't, you're just going to go out and you're going to play all the stuff that you already know, and you're never going to try to find these new sounds in your playing, try to cross that new bridge. And when you get to the other side, it's the best feeling in the world. So it really pays off because when you push yourself, you're going to continue to get better. You're going to continue to stay inspired to reach that new level of playing, to learn that new concept, to get that new sound into your improvising, to learn that new tune that you've never known before. So I guess through this story, what I'm trying to tell you guys is even when you're in your 80s, you still got to wake up and practice every day. And I don't care if this is a hobby for you, you should still carve out that time every day, even if it's only 5 minutes. Get out the horn or sit down at the piano or, get out the bass or whatever you play and try to make a little bit of progress because you know what? That 5 minutes over an entire year is really going to add up to something. So with anything in life, the thing that we don't want to do is become stale, right? And if we stop practicing and expanding our horizons, that's exactly what's going to happen to our playing. It's going to become stale. So next time you don't want to practice, think about James Moody. Think about how he used to get up every single morning, even in his 80s, and practice the saxophone and try to find that new frontier of music so he could share it with everybody and get that personal satisfaction of continuous growth. That's a great thing to keep in your mind. Write that down and put it on your wall. Continuous growth. All right, everybody, get out there and make it the best Monday ever and then make it the best week ever. I'll see you on Friday for our regularly scheduled programming. Have a great week, everybody. Talk to you soon.